That's my theme music. Welcome back, macro people. Let's take a look at fiscal policy and spending multipliers. As you can see over here, we've got our ubiquitous aggregate supply and aggregate demand model right here. And what we've noticed is, all right, we're shifting. This one, for example, is shifting to the right. We want to know, how do we close this gap right here, right? How do we either get aggregate demand to move this way, or how do we get aggregate demand to move that way? Remember, most of these things are a Keynesian model, and so we're focusing on aggregate demand in a lot of these. So let's look at some fiscal policy practice. So let's say that Congress uses discretionary fiscal policy to manipulate the following economy. The MPC is 0.8. Okay, so the first thing that it asks us here is what type of gap. So there's a process to this. So let's look at the type of gap. Number one says, what type of gap? What type of gap do you think we have? If you said we have a recessionary gap because we're only producing 500 billion, right, when we should be producing a trillion, you would be correct. So this answer is recessionary. Perfect. Contractionary or expansionary fiscal policy needed. If you said expansionary, good, because we need to expand the economy. Aggregate demand should move outward or right. What are the two options to fix the gap? Well, we can increase spending, right? Government spending. Or we can decrease taxes. Or both. Usually they do both. Government always spends, really, honestly. Let's just be honest. You can do both, or one or the other. And that's right. Spending is going to increase aggregate demand, and decreasing taxes is going to put more money into people's pocket, and they're going to spend more, we assume. So how much initial government spending? Now, you are smart now, and you know, well, hey, hold on here a second. There's a $500 billion gap. So we'll just say 500. We'll say $500 gap. There's a $500 gap. And I know that the marginal propensity to consume is 0.8. So I know that the marginal propensity to save is 0.2. So to find my multiplier, right, I'm going to put 1 over my marginal propensity to save. And that's going to give me 5. So my spending multiplier is 5. And I need to close a gap of 500. So how many times does 5 go into 500? Well, it goes into it 100 times. So I need to spend, right? I need to spend, right? Because it's asking how much government spending, not taxes, is needed. So we need to do plus or increase spending by $100 billion, because that $100 billion will eventually, as it gets multiplied in the economy, turn into $500 billion. All right, and that's going to take some time. That's not going to happen right away, right? We wish, but it will happen. We hope. We assume. We cross our fingers. All right. Okay, that's. Economics is a pretty good science, but it's not perfect science. Okay. All right. We're going to do the same one. We'll do this in black ink. What type of gap? You should be getting good at these, right? This type of gap right here is an inflationary gap, right? So we have an inflationary gap. Contractionary or expansionary needed? Well, we're going to contract. What are the two options? Well, in a contractionary gap, right, we would want to decrease spending, right, or increase taxes. And how much spending, right? It's asking spending. How much spending should we? So we have a gap of 80 to 100, so that's 20. There's a gap of 20. We know that our marginal propensity to consume is 0.5, so our marginal propensity to save is 0.5, and that's going to equal 2. And we have a gap of 20, so how many times does 2 go into 20? It goes in there 10 times, right? So we would want to decrease government spending. We want to subtract, right? 10, looks like billion dollars from our economy. We would want to take $10 billion out, or decrease our spending by $10 billion. All right, taxes. Now, taxes is a little bit difficult here, right? Because if you give somebody money, so let's say that you give somebody $100 and their marginal propensity to consume is 0.8. Now, you can't say that they're going to spend, right? The government will spend $100. If the government spends $100, it spends $100. But if you were to give somebody $100, right, it's not going to be $100 that gets multiplied in society, right? Because that person's going to get the $100. They're going to consume $80 of it, and they're going to save $20 of it. So that messes up our math a little bit. But here's the easy part. I'm going to give you a very quick way to figure out, well, what is my taxing multiplier? Your taxing multiplier, right? So your tax multiplier is, right, equals your spending multiplier. Whoops. Running out of room here. That is horrible. How are you supposed to take notes with that? Come on, man. So your tax multiplier equals your spending multiplier minus 1. Okay? So we know that in this situation, our MPC is 0.5. So the math would look like this, right? Our spending multiplier is 1 over 0.5 equals 2. Okay? And then we say, okay, so our tax multiplier is 2 minus 1, which minus is 1. We'll just call that TM, tax multiplier. Oh, okay. So how would we figure out what this question would be right here? What two options does the government have over here? I'll put this in blue now. So what two options does the government have? We have a recessionary gap right here. Okay. It's it looks like it's $20 billion. So what two options does the government have? They can increase spending or decrease tax. Okay. Well, how much should they increase government spending? Well, we know our multiplier is 2, so they could increase spending by $10 billion. Right? It's the exact same one as we did last time. Or how much would they, if they were to say, okay, we're not spending anything, but we want to do a tax cut, how much should they cut taxes? Well, our taxing multiplier down here is 1, right? It's 1, spending multiplier minus 1. So 1 goes into 20, right? We'd have to decrease taxes by 20 billion. Why? Because of this 20 billion, 10's going to get spent, and, right, or consumed. Let's say consumed. And 10 will get saved. So this 10 will get consumed. It'll do the same thing as the government spending. Okay? And that's how tax works. If you have questions on any of this, please let me know. Until then,